Hola clase. We're going to review the preterite tense in Spanish. Nosotros vamos a hacer un repaso del pretérito en español. In order to talk about events in the past, Spanish uses two different tenses that are simple tenses. The first is called the preterite, or the el pretérito, or the other is called the imperfect, or el imperfecto. In this lesson, you're going to learn about the preterite, which you learned about previously, but we want to review. So I really need you to have your notebooks out and ready to go to take in a lot of information. Even if you think you know it, it can't hurt you to write it down again. I'm going to be checking your notes, so please do write down all the information contained here. Okay. Now the preterite is a tense that is used to describe very simply something that happened in the past. Often we talk about something that's happened and it's over and it's done with. It's a complete past action. So if you see the chart below, you're going to, after I'm finished talking in a moment, you're going to pause the video and you're going to take down the notes in the chart below. There's a lot of information here. As you learned in the present tense, we have AR verbs, ER verbs, and IR verbs. The same thing is true in other tenses too. In this case, we have el pretérito, and first you have the first column, which is AR verbs, and then the second column is your ER verbs, and the third column is your IR verbs. So I want you to now pause the video and write down a column using those verbs, or if you prefer a different verb, maybe hablar is the one you like for AR verbs, and write it down. The endings e, aste, o, amos, astes, aron are going to be the same for all regular AR verbs. Okay, and so now with ER verbs, the same thing is true. They use the verb vender to sell. You can use that if there's something that you prefer to use, but be very careful in making your choices. And your endings are going to be I, iste, io. Make sure you put the accent on the I in I and on the O in io. And then imos, istes, and ieron. Okay. And then the IR verbs are just like it. The endings are the same. Even the nosotros form is imos for ER and IR verbs. There's no emos in the ER verbs. Just remember that. When you're done writing all these down, we're going to move on to the next slide. Okay. Atención, the yo and the usted, el, ella form, the first person singular and the third person singular of all of these conjugations have written accents on the last syllable to show that it's stressed. I want you to think about the fact that I speak is said hablo, H-A-B-L-O, but he spoke is habló. The accent on the O makes you then emphasize that final syllable. So if I say hablo, I'm saying I speak. If I'm saying habló, él habló, I'm saying he spoke. So be sure that you note that accent and make it every time on that word. The endings for regular ER and IR verbs are identical in the preterite. The imos form is used for both. Now look at the little pictures that we have here. ¿Qué compraste? What does that mean? It means, what did you buy? Compré esta bolsa. I bought this bag. Note that the nosotros or nosotras forms of AR and IR verbs in the preterite are identical to their counterparts in the present tense. So how will you know the difference, whether I'm speaking about the past or the present? Well, that is all done from context. So look at the two sentences that are on this slide. En invierno compramos ropa. In the wintertime, are we saying we buy clothing or we bought clothing? Of course we're saying we buy clothing. It just makes sense. Anoche, last night, compramos unos zapatos. We bought some shoes. And so, of course, when we're saying anoche, we're saying last night, we bought. It's all from the context. AR and ER verbs that have a stem change in the present tense are regular in the preterite. They do not have a stem change. Now, I'm going to emphasize that is only true of AR and ER verbs that have a stem change. So, look at the verbs listed here. Cerrar, to close, right? Volver, to return. Jugar, to play. Those verbs are AR verbs, and they do not carry over the stem change. You simply use the jug, the volve, or the ser part of the verb. So it says, La tienda cerró a las 6. The store closed at 6 o'clock. Carlitos volvió tarde. Carlito returned late. Él jugó al fútbol. He played soccer. And so you see these verbs do not retain the stem change. They're regular, just like the other verbs that are AR and ER verbs. IR verbs that have a stem change in the present tense also have a stem change in the preterite, and we will look at those in a little bit later time in Chapter 8. Verbs that end in CAR, GAR, and ZAR have a spelling change in order to preserve the way you pronounce the words. So this is in the yo form only. So look at these exceptions. Buscar, in order, you can't say busque, CE. That would, a CE says it say like an S. And so the C changes to a QU in this form, and we say busque. Llegar, if we had GE, it would say it like a sound, and we don't want to say yehe, right? And so we add a U in to make that G a hard U. Yo llegué, LLEGUE with an accent. Empezar, even though it's stem changing, it's an AR verb, so it's going to be empez in general. That Z is going to change to a C to keep the S sound. So yo empecé is I started. All of the other forms are regular. None of them take an E, and therefore they stay regular. 3 other verbs that you need to know about: creer, to create, leer, to read, and oír, to hear, have spelling changes in the preterite as well. The I of the verb endings in creer, leer, and oír carries an accent in the yo, tú, nosotros, nosotras, and vosotros, vosotras forms. But it changes to a Y in the third person singular and plural forms. So again, look here, you got your stem of cre. So creí, creíste, creyó. That creyó changed to a Y before the O with an accent mark. Creímos, creístes, creyeron, and that Y, I changes to a Y in creyeron. The same thing is true of the other 2 verbs. So I want you to pause the video and write this down so you will remember and have a list of things that you have to memorize for spelling changes when you write or read in Spanish. Ver is regular in the preterite with the exception of the fact that it drops all the accent marks that the other verbs take. So vi, for example, is not vi with an accent, it's just vi. So we have the same sounds: vi, viste, vio, vimos, vistes, vieron. No accent marks whatsoever. Here's some words that will help you identify when to use the preterite. Anoche, last night. Anteayer, the day before yesterday. Ayer, yesterday. De repente, suddenly, when there's an ongoing action, we're actually going to use that tense. We haven't learned the imperfecto, and something suddenly happens, and we're going to use de repente, and then we're going to use a verb in the pretérito. Desde, hasta, from, until. It's a structured over and done with period of time. You're going to use el pretérito. Pasado, last or past. El año pasado, last year. La semana pasada, last week. Una vez, one time. Dos veces, 2 times. And ya, already. So we have a couple of examples of sentences. Ayer llegué a Santiago de Cuba. So yesterday I arrived in Santiago de Cuba. These are all in the preterite. They're all completed over and done with actions in a definite period of time. Now here's a special phrase. Acabar de means just, and it's used in the present tense. So even though I'm teaching you the past tense, This particular phrase is an idiomatic expression in Spanish, and you should write this in your notes because sometimes you will have to use it. If you want to say that you just did something, I just bought a skirt, you say acabo de comprar. So you use the present tense form of acabar. In this case with you just bought the skirt, right? So you said I bought the skirt, acabo de, and then you use the infinitive of the verb you want to say what you did just a moment ago in the past. Acabo de comprar. Acabas de ir de compras. You just went shopping. Again, it's over and done with, but you just want to emphasize that you just did it. And so instead of using the preterite, you're going to use the verb acabar de, conjugate it with whoever you're talking about, and then use the infinitive. And that'll tell you what you just did. Okay, now let's do one exercise and then you're done with this activity. The preterite tense of regular verbs, you are going to give me the right tense for ER verbs like comer, the verb comer, salir, comenzar, and leer. Okay? So you go ahead and fill out this chart and then you are done with your homework. Muy bien, hasta mañana.